Welcome to Milonga Mascarita, the podcast. It's the tango podcast where we look at the issues, the personalities, and the people around the world who bring the backstories to tango. That song that you just heard was of obviously La Cumbracita. You've heard it millions of times at Milonga. You may not have heard this version, and it's very special with the guest that I'm interviewing and the topic we're discussing today. That was Astor Piazzolla and Troilo, and a 1950s recording. But what's unique is Astor Piazzolla, before he became the Astor Piazzolla that we know, was part of the Troilo Orchestra and was part of the dance culture until he abandoned it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that with my guest, who is joining us all the way from the New Territories in Hong Kong, where he's in quarantine, Mariano Chiacchiarini, who is the conductor with the Hong Kong Philharmonic for two shows. The one that we're going to be talking about is Piazzolla at 100, marking the centennial of the birth of Astor Piazzolla, which was March 11th, I believe, 1921. He passed away in, I think, 1992, sadly, of cancer, but he left an interesting body of work and he really transformed music. Mariano, thanks for joining us. How has it been going? You're in quarantine. This is a remarkable story that the concerts in Hong Kong start with the Brahms concert on the 10th of April. And then a week later, you have the shows with the Piazzolla show. So what are you doing in between that time? When did you arrive? How are you preparing for these concerts when you're in quarantine?
First of all, hi to everybody. A pleasure to be here, Ray. Yes, I came 9 days ago, 10 and a half more actually now, to go out from here at 11:59 before midnight. I am allowed to leave the hotel, probably to go to another hotel, but at least to breathe some fresh air. And it was like that. We had actually a concert with the Hong Kong Philharmonic in February 2020, last year, and then it began Corona. Corona began from east to the west, so the concert here was canceled. Then concerts in Germany, where I live actually, were canceled. And then my concerts in Argentina in March were canceled. So it was going from the east to the west. And then happened what we all know. We had a possibility to do again the concert that we had planned. It was not Piazzolla in November, but then it was this change of 2 weeks quarantine. And for me, it was not possible because 2 weeks in a concert agenda, in a concert calendar, is really a lot of time. So I couldn't come. And now is still worth is 3 weeks quarantine, but all the things that I had in Germany were also canceled. So from the programmation of the orchestra, they asked me, Mariano, look, we have this possibility to play next year. Are you interested? And I said, look, I could come, but for only one concert, I think it's not worth. So we'll play actually 4 concerts together. We will have on 10th of April, Best of Brahms. We'll play Brahms' 4th Symphony and one fagot bassoon concerto with the bassoon player from the orchestra, Weber. Then we will have the day after, on the Sunday, a family concert with a lot of music connected with animals from Milieu, Haydn, Saint-Saëns. It will be really fun. And the week after, Friday and Saturday, we will have this Concert Piazzolla anniversary, which is actually a kind of trip with Piazzolla's music. We will play also music from his teacher, from Ginastera. And then we will have the seasons with the concertmaster of the orchestra. And of course, we will have dancers. For all the milongueros, you will have the opportunity to see Lilian and Raymond. They will dance 3 or 4 tangos for us.
This is an amazing story because to have this concert, you've just talked about like the various hurdles that you had to go through, but just to sort of put into perspective for people watching this, especially locally in Hong Kong, how special it was, you had to cancel your Paris show because of COVID. So the fact that this has been canceled before and we are lucky enough to have this performance, and it ties in very nicely with the Piazzolla centennial, is remarkable.
It's actually a historical concert. First of all, because of the 100 years of Piazzolla, and that I have the opportunity to do it. I am my studies are as a classical musician, but I am from my childhood very connected with tango. I dance tango, I love the dance, and I came perhaps to study classical music because of Piazzolla too, because it was the mix of something very popular as tango with something very academic as classical music. So one of the first pieces I really wanted to play on the piano was the Adios Nonino, for sure, and I am very connected with his music. And the most we can play that with audience. You have to imagine all the world has stopped now again, and we can play for audience. The people are allowed to be there. So many from the tango fans and also from the Brahms concert, they were writing me, Mariano, Maestro, we don't know each other, but it's a possibility, if they will play the concert as streaming. And I was like, could be, I don't know, I'm not sure, but try to go there. You have the possibility. You are allowed to see a concert, and there are so many studies that being in a theater is not dangerous at all.
Well, I have my tickets, just so that.
Well done.
But what can we expect? Because I wanted to get a sense. I've talked to some other artists during the COVID lockdown, and as a conductor, what is the difference between the idea of being in a situation where it is streaming versus the live situation? I mean, how does that change the dynamic for you as the conductor working with a group for the first time, effectively?
We are still trying to get used to it. I did so many recordings, so many streaming concerts, and also some crazy stuff. As last month we had the soloist was in Tokyo, and the orchestra was in Germany, and we were recording live, and it was sending live on streaming. So we try everything to continue playing music because we miss it, we love it. But the situation, this adrenaline to have people there who will, for example, from streaming concerts, it's very sad when you finish a piece and that was good, that you don't listen, you don't hear anybody clapping. So the first feeling is, oh, perhaps it wasn't so good. And so we miss our audience. We need this concert situation, have audience. It's a bit dry. Concert halls are thought to have audience, not to play without them, not without the people. Huh?
Well, and from the audience perspective.
So we are in a process of adaptation. Yeah, Claire. Yes, we are in adaptation, but we are really looking forward to going out from this situation, to have again the concert halls full, to be able to do choir music. Choir are still forbidden in the most concert halls of the world, so we are hoping to have better times soon.
Let me call up an example of what we can expect. What do you feel when you listen or play Piazzolla? What sort of comes to mind for you?
It's the same way I play this. I feel at home. It's a very nice feeling, but it's very challenging because, of course, Hong Kong Philharmonic is an amazing orchestra. You have really a number one here in Hong Kong, but they are not tango musicians, and playing this music needs sometimes to change. The connected with the dance, and perhaps is tango the only music where normal tango orchestra, let's say with violins, as with strings, with bandoneon and with the piano, is without percussion instruments. You don't have percussion in tango. That's a tango orchestra. So to replace these instruments that are missing, you will have in the double bass, for example, bombo, so they play behind of the instrument. You have the very famous chicharra in the violin, so you play behind the bridge, this click, 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 or you will have the tambor also in the strings. Many tango effects, many things that you could say, you could see in Piazzolla. He was very often hitting his bandoneon to accent this 3-3-2, ticka-ta-ticka-ta-ta, ticka-ta-ticka-ta-ta. So this kind of noises and this dirty of tango, it's very hard to get to the orchestra. But if it works, it's really amazing. And we don't play only arrangements. For example, the tangazo is original from Piazzolla for big orchestra. That's the idea of tangazo, a big tango. It's really a lot of work. It's very challenging, but when the result is there, it feels as I am in Buenos Aires in Calle Corrientes.
How do you rehearse? Because again, to perform something like this and under the challenges you're talking about, you're not going to have that much time. So how much of this is rehearsed that we're going to see on the 16th and 17th of April, and how much will be, as you call it, the dirty side of it, the idea of improvisation?
Let's see. The orchestra rehearse quite concentrated. That means we rehearse 2 days. Concert. I will meet Lily and Ray before. We have some recordings of the pieces that we are playing, so we don't need to rehearse they don't need to rehearse the dancing things with the orchestra there. Only for one rehearsal will be like that. So we have also the COVID restrictions. So we are not allowed to rehearse so long, but I think it will be enough. It's an amazing orchestra and the ideas are quite clear. I think they will love the music.
Tell us about Piazzolla, because I'm going to call up an interview while you're doing that. But what do you think is the cultural significance of Piazzolla to tango and to modern music in general? Because again, you've talked about it in terms of the very specific nature of tango music, and then sort of moving that into a kind of orchestral arrangement is really kind of like a challenge musically and artistically.
When we hear Piazzolla, we do automatically an association with tango, no? But the first thing that surprised me was in a Milonga, why we almost never play Piazzolla. In a Milonga, you don't listen to Piazzolla so often because it was perhaps too complicated to dance, or because of too many revolutions. So you were talking about the orchestra of Troilo, where he was playing bandoneon and doing the arrangements. But then when he went out from him and he began with Florentino, and then he grounded his Orquesta del 46 in 46. From that time, it began this revolution of tango. So in a way, tango was well known in all the world, also because of Piazzolla, but in Buenos Aires, composers, Piazzolla was the destroyer of tango, because it was he came with too many crazy ideas, and he knew, he was visionary. He knew the future of the music, of this music of tango, that some changes should be made. So he put many new things. The easy to recognize is this to change the accentuation of the beating. So you have in tango ram pim pam pam, you have the 1 and the 3. You have 2 strong beats, and that is quite easy to dance. So you sing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So if you are in a tango lesson, the teacher will be singing this 1, 2, 3, 4. So you walk At the beginning, you walk with this beating, and then he changed that. He did like a rhythmical revolution, perhaps with the influences of Stravinsky, Bartok, and classical music. But that was not only that was not the only thing that he did. For example, to put new instruments, electrical guitar. That was crazy. That was he didn't receive forgiveness for that. It was an instrument absolutely strange for this music and came from outside. So we have these two words. One is he brought tango again to be the number one in the world, because everybody knows Libertango, everybody knows Adios Nonino, and if you begin to ask him a bit more, they will recognize other music because it was used for movies, or because they listen some string accordion player on the street. In Europe, the accordion players are very often playing Piazzolla. However, it's not music written for accordion, for bandoneon, which is other world. And we have these two words. One is the making tango still more famous, and at the same time in the country to make a revolution and to have to be hated by many tango lovers. He has so many anecdotes, so many stories that some of them are very funny, others are very sad. So taxi drivers were not stopping with him. Taxi drivers didn't want to pick him up. And perhaps till the 90s, till his death, you couldn't talk with a taxi driver in Buenos Aires about Piazzolla. Piazzolla was forbidden. It was not the music. And it's interesting because in the academic world, if you were studying music, Piazzolla was very recognized. The main problem was in the tango scene. Of course, he loved provocation. He loved to fight. And he knew that he had to fight. It was a fight that he was not alone, actually, but it was a fight that to be fought. And he thought he knew about that. So he was saying something like, the main problem of tango composers is that they are dead, but nobody told them. So and can you imagine if you are a tango composer and you listen to something like that, you hear something like that, you get crazy. So his personality was so amazing, so interesting, such because he was a virtuoso of the bandoneon. He didn't need to become a composer for living. He could play bandoneon in milongas and could be happy like that because he was one of the best. But he had a dream. He wanted to be educated. He wanted to learn more. He wanted to compose his music. He wanted to be Piazzolla.
I'm going to play. It's interesting that you bring this up because it's now worth looking at. This is an interview that he did. At
the moment, 1955 in Argentina, the tango starts dying. The cause of it is that the music of Elvis Presley, Bill Haley, rock and roll starts coming into Argentina. And the young generation, 16, 17, 18 years old, they start getting more excited with rock and roll than with tango. They're not interested in tango, so they listen to rock and roll. Then the Beatles come in the 60s, and that's the end of the tango. But my music goes on, and the young people understood my music because it wasn't boring. I mean, the old traditional tango was very boring. It's repeated. There's no changes. There have been no changes in that music for at least 40 or 50 years until I come in. And when I come in, I'm taking away the tango, the people. It's a sentimental problem. It was like a war of one against all. They were all against me in that moment in 1954. And it was really terrible. I mean, they threatened my family. They threatened me, my son and my daughter. They gave me a beating once in the street because I was changing the music. I mean, it was fun. I mean, you should study music in this life, but you have to know how to defend yourself. You must know a little about. Today you learn a little karate and all that. It's very important too. And if you decided to change music, you better know something about boxing or martial sports. But just the same, the people who menaced me in those moments, today, maybe they're my friends. Maybe they love me. Maybe, I said. I'm not sure of it.
The idea that this was a renegade who really was true to his own spirit. And that, I think, is reflected in the character of the music, where there is sort of echoes of his mentors in Troilo, but then he goes off in a completely different direction.
It's so sweet to listen to him.
I didn't realize that he spoke flawless English. Like, he speaks with this sort of American accent as a result of growing up in the United States, which in some ways is kind of like, from the Argentine mentality, you've left us, you are no longer part of us. But, he's got this idea that the music is in him and he is the music, the embodiment of that. And so each of the changes that he makes, whether it's this sort of idea that you talked about with the tapping or the sound of the contrabajo or the bass, that evokes a memory for him of, I think, like a street light or a police officer, or some aspect of Argentine life that he's translated into music.
What is quite interesting from him is you hear his music and it's always with the signature. You recognize from the first 10 bars, that's Piazzolla. And I think that was his intention. He wanted to be recognized, he wanted to be himself. And because of the rhythm, because of the phrasing, because of what the double bass is doing is very clear. This passacaglia bass is so typical from him because he took it from Baroque music and whatever. I don't want to be very, very academic, but you hear his music and you listen to his music and you recognize from the very first moment, that's Piazzolla. And I think that was his wish. It was what he wanted. About this interview, I think it's in the same place where I wanted to tell you this story. We always think Piazzolla with a very bad mood, always ready to fight and screaming. But once I was I think it was 3 years ago, I was in Cologne. I had concert with a radio orchestra, and we were playing some Piazzolla, and the orchestra loved the music. And it was that moment where you realize you have a good relationship with the orchestra, so you can talk. And I told them, that one of the only good recordings of Piazzolla with video playing with an orchestra was actually with you, with the Cologne Radio Orchestra, because we don't have so much material from him playing with orchestra. We have one in Teatro Cologne in the 83, I think, with Calderón conducting, and this one with the VDR. And the musicians were surprised because they didn't know that this recording existed till 2-3. First was 1 second violin behind, did like that. I played there, and it was so emotional. He came after the break with 2 other musicians that played in that concert, telling me how nice he was, how open he was, how amazing it was to play music with him. So I think sometimes he's acting. I think we should really think that he was a bit ahead of everything what's going on, and he knew a lot about marketing, a lot about how to talk with press, how to talk about others, and I think he has this histrionic way of talking, which makes everything still more interesting.
Yeah, he's very provocative. But I think that, when you talk about it from the standpoint of the milonguero, there's, I think, this idea of tango for dance and the dance halls and the milongas. And then he takes it more as an art form rather than a strict nightly entertainment. And I think that is something that when we see this on the 16th and the 17th, will come through in the performances of Lily and Raymond as well. That it's not this kind of dance hall. This is really taking it to a higher art form, isn't it?
The main wish was that his music not being to dance, but being to be listened. That was the main difference. He wanted this music to be listened. And there is this small piece for guitar and flute from him, Histoire du Tango, the history of tango, where each movement begins in the bordel, you have a cafe, the nightclub, and at the idea is taking tango to a concert hall, taking tango to music that you sit and you enjoy as you could enjoy Brahms or Mozart.
Since you brought up Brahms and you're going to be conducting the Brahms concert on the 10th, I guess I have to ask you, because you're really at different ends of the musical spectrum with this very traditional classical concert, and then this progressive musical style that was pioneered by Piazzolla. How, as an artist, do you manage to devote appropriate attention and energy to both of those types, or those extremes of musical art?
So my studies were, actually, I'm a classical musician. I came to Germany when I was 22 and to learn Beethoven, because I had a scholarship to go to Boston, and my German teacher in Buenos Aires told me, you want to go to Boston to learn Beethoven, go to Cologne, you are 20 kilometers from his home in Bonn. So I came to Germany to learn this tradition, and actually that is what is my education. I am a classical musician. I love to play Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, Verdi, but I cannot deny my roots. I am also Argentinian. Actually, I always say that I have the three passes. I am Italian, Argentinian, and German. I have I got a kind of James Bond, and I cannot deny it. It's part of my life. Actually, more than a third of my life I expended in Germany. So for me was very important to breathe this tradition, to learn Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart from being there where this music was created. And what we are playing is a dream. The Fourth Symphony is perhaps the most famous from him, and it's something that also orchestra musicians enjoy a lot to play, especially string player. It's a dream to play that music. So when they told me about Brahms, I was like, okay, I could do a month of quarantine. It's no problem. It's very music. It's music that is very close to the heart. But for us, for me as a conductor, for an artist, it's very important to be flexible, to be able to take from many sides, to play contemporary music, to play opera, to play classical, and to play also tango, and whatever we do, to take it very, very seriously.
Do you think that with Piazzolla at 100, that there's like a new documentary out called about his life that's going to be playing here at the end of the month as well? There's all these sort of activities, that there's going to be this rebirth of interest in his music, and that could also kind of inspire people to come back out to dance tango in general, when they kind of understand that this is part of the tango culture, although not part of the dance culture so much.
If probably they are playing the Years of the Shark, this documentary.
That's right.
If you can go to watch it, because it shows many things. The documentary is also made by the friend of mine, so it's quite beautiful and well done. But if you look at that, you will realize many other things that are perhaps behind. For example, it's amazing how many recordings he had of himself with his family, or in a time where you didn't have a cell phone to do a movie of you're coming to a quarantine in Hong Kong. He had so much material, so many things that they are being played, and that in that documentary. And the other thing that is a bit behind is how sweet he was. He was a family guy, and how close he was to his friends. It's very, very nice. I really recommend to watch it.
I'm going to play another interview, and I think, again, we can talk a little bit about it. This is an interview that he did for the BBC, and then there's also a short clip of him playing.
How does it play? What do you do with the different hands?
Well, it has a left hand with the low notes. And the right hand like a violin. Like a string quartet.
Doesn't play chords.
Yes. No, not in the single like the accordion. No. If you want a chord, you have to use all your fingers. We only have 4 fingers in each side, another finger to hold the instrument. And in the chords, you make them each one. You can get 8 notes, a chord of 8 notes on it. I mean, it's rather difficult in the right hand. I mean, if you do a scale, you use this technique. And when you close the C, instead of being here, it's up here. It changes. And in the left hand, it has 2 techniques completely different from the right hand. You do the C starts here, and when you close, it starts here. So it's very diabolic. I mean, the person who's interested in learning this instrument must be a little out of his mind. Zero Hour was composed when I used to work in the nightclubs and the cabarets in Buenos Aires. Every time we had a break when we used to play till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and at 12 o'clock midnight we used to leave and walk around the city that's always desolated, and there was nobody in the streets. The only thing you can hear is a siren of an ambulance or the police, and it was always with very much silence and only the footsteps of somebody who could be walking in the streets at that hour.
I think that this really kind of illustrates where this music is quite different from the D'Arienzo or the other sort of dance orchestras that were popular in that golden era from about 1935 until about 1950.
Each orchestra has had and has today its own personality. That was the idea. Of course, the D'Arienzo, I love D'Arienzo. It's this rhythmical, but the same conductor, let's say, the same director of the orchestra changed. Once in a tango lesson, I remember we danced like 30 different versions of La Comparsita, and most of them were from D'Arienzo, and they were so different with a crazy tempo change from the same conductor. It was very heavy and slower, and then the other was very fast, and it was the same D'Arienzo. So it depended a lot on which time of the tango history was, but anyway, all the orchestra wanted to have their own signature, and the influence of Troilo was very, very big. I think Troilo is not to underestimate it. However, he always tells about the situation that he was arranging for Troilo, and from all the notes that he was writing, Troilo was erasing the half because everything was too much. and of course, then he realized he had to do his own way. But the same here. In classical music, you have orchestras with a very different personality. German orchestras are with a very darker sound in the brass. Americans are more like out. All the Italian orchestras are cantabile. Whatever you play, it sounds always as they are singing, because they have this traditional in opera. And tango is not exception. It changed a lot with the time. You have to imagine other things that were changing the orchestra. The beginning of tango was with the flute and guitar. That were the first instruments in tango, because tango was much faster. And the second thing, tango was in very dark and small places, like a bordel. Then when you changed to a milonga, a big milonga and a big hall, you needed more sound. You needed bigger instruments. And for that, bandoneon was perfect, and the piano replacing the harmonic in the guitar, because piano is much louder too. So this everything is also connected with this evolution, where the music was played and the personality of the musicians, the personality of the orchestra, the sound, the texture they want to show.
The piano in tango, at least the traditional tango, is a percussion instrument, isn't it?
Well, you have of course this knocking on the instrument. You have the marcato pugliese. You are playing with all your left hand, like boom, in all the low notes of the piano. So it sounds really as if you are playing a very, very low drum in all the strong beats. But of course, the right hand is quite lyrical. But the rhythmic in the piano is very often moving the orchestra. This how the syncopation is played, how this the double bass and the piano are a bit the rhythm and the groove in these orchestras.
You talked about the personalities of the different orchestras depending on the different parts of the world. How do you explain Piazzolla to an orchestra that hasn't been familiar with him, like the Hong Kong Philharmonic? I mean, is there, besides the obvious part of playing through the notes and the score, is there any kind of mindset that musicians need to have that would be different, for example, from the Brahms concert? You're using the same musicians, I assume. So they're going to be playing one set of very traditional music in the Hungarian dance, and then a week later they're playing Libertango and a variety of other, Piazzolla classics. What's the way in which you kind of incept the idea for them that this is what I want you to think about when you're playing these notes, so that the audience has a specific type of reaction, and then again with the dance that's going to be performed alongside it?
Good. It's a very good question, but that's actually my job. The same if I am playing Ravel in Buenos Aires, or in Italy I'm playing Bartok. As a conductor, you have to come with a very clear idea, a very strong idea of sound, and with Piazzolla, perhaps the main problem is that very often it's underestimated. So if you see the notes in Piazzolla, it's almost, look what the comparison, almost the same problem as with Mozart. It looks easy. It looks easy to play. Perhaps there are not so many notes, but then is the big challenge to play it as it should be. Mozart is so crystalline that if you don't play in the right style, you destroy the music. And with Piazzolla, of course, in another way, it's the same problem. This dirtiness that we were talking about, this syncopation, how to phrase the noises, these techniques, which are very often not well written and not well played. In many of the scores of Piazzolla, he didn't need to explain how it should be played, because in Buenos Aires everybody knew. But if you take this music out, perhaps you have to take 1 second to explain what a tambor is, what a chicharra is, what faja, what bombo is, many things. But the orchestra, again, they are fantastic musicians and they are flexible. They are playing every week different repertoires, and they will do the same with Piazzolla. They will be very open, and my job is to convince them that I have a very clear idea how to play this music, and I think we will have two amazing concerts with them.
I'm sure. As we start to kind of wrap up, because this is a fascinating conversation, what about for the audience? What is it that you want the audience to walk away with after this show? Because obviously there's going to be a component of people that are tangueros going to see Lillian Raymond and obviously to experience that. But there's also going to be a group of people in there that have, that are concert goers, that are fans of the Hong Kong Philharmonic, but are going to be going to this and going, wait a second, Piazzolla 100, who is this? And so without getting into the history that we've gotten into, how do you inspire that in the time that you have for this performance?
We have to, as a musicians, more than ever, we have to build all the time bridges, connections to this audience that perhaps they have no connection, they have nothing to do with this music. And my wish is after the concert that they say, wow, that was cool. I would love to hear a bit more about that. It was a lot of strength. It was so much force. I don't know, so much fire, because we always think of tango with fire and Latin American music with this happiness to life, but in this case also very melancholic. In the case of Piazzolla, I want a very curious audience that they have a lot they want to learn a lot more about that. I will try also before each piece to say one or two words to make it easier to listen to and to know perhaps where to go with this music. Is of course it's music with a lot of fire, but it's also music with a lot of pictures. Because when you play the seasons, you can imagine the Argentine winter dark, because we don't have all the time summer, as many people know. Many people think we have in the south, we have minus 20 degrees in winter, so it could be really, really cold. And then the beginning of spring with everything full of flowers, and then in the seasons, or the tangazo, very, very dark melancholic beginning, and then to this clear Piazzolla sound with the rhythm in the 3/3/2. So my wish is that they want to come again
and dance.
And perhaps as many Europeans, for example, did after Piazzolla, they try to do their first tango lesson.
Yeah.
Because they love the music.
And to come back out. Come back out to Milongas if they haven't been in a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Or perhaps they want to follow Lillian Raymond to the next show, wherever it is.
This is, I think, an amazing story in terms of just the sacrifice artistically that you make to come in and do 3 weeks and then play with this group that you have never met before, and then add a dance component to it. So there's all these different layers of this performance, and I really do. I'm very excited about going, first of all, but I'm it's quite inspiring to talk to you about it in such a very sort of ordinary way that makes it easy for people that don't know about music, or don't know about Argentina, or don't know about tango, or don't even know who Piazzolla is, to kind of get an appreciation for this is a cultural event that I think would be a springboard to hopefully post-pandemic recovery.
Ties back. We need the music with audience. We need to be able to dance if you like milongas, and to hug people again as we were used to. Yes. I hope it will be for me too, because I am expecting the end of this pandemic, as everybody, it's like a shock of optimism, a shock of happiness to what's coming in this future.
Mariano, I'm looking forward to the concerts, and I hope that we can meet up beforehand and talk about music and tango and things like that. But I really appreciate the time that you've taken with us, and we will see you very soon. Thank you again.
For sure, right. Thank you very much, and I am looking forward to seeing all of you in the 2 concerts there.